Okay, I'm live. It is August 2nd, 2024, and I just wrapped up Reader Digest's Great Cases of Scotland Yard, which right off the bat, you would assume that these are all non fictional accounts. Just the facts, ma'am. You might not recognize that quote because it's from long ago, but this book was written in 1973, I believe. This says 1978, but I thought I looked up and it said 73. Anyway, quite old book. And it's got one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight short stories that aren't really that short in it. And the first ones are the best ones. So, The Stealing of Muriel McKay is a riveting story, and it ties in with current day, believe it or not. I was very surprised when I got done reading that short story and looking up potentially what happened to the killers. I found out that they were still searching for her body as of the end of July of this year, which was crazy. They were digging up the estate where they believe she was, and they didn't find her again. So they've been looking for her for like 50 years. And I won't give you too many details because I don't want to spoil it for you. But if you find this book used or something, that's a great story. The next story, Neil Cream Poisoner by Elizabeth Jenkins. This was bizarre because it went from being almost just the facts, ma'am, to reading like a novel. And I thought, well, why is it reading like a novel? It made it sound like it was trying to be a fictional murder mystery rather than a factual story case of Scotland Yard. The guy that was involved, though, the poisoner, was quite nuts. And it was interesting listening to the details of his insanity. But what wasn't so great was listening to all the airy language in it that went on too long. It was like almost 100 pages of fluffy language that could have been pared down to probably a 40-page story at most. But yet, a serial poisoner is an interesting story if you've not heard of him. He even tried to go by Jack the Ripper, and his execution was quite interesting too. Then there was, I think it was this one, the case of Stanley Seti. This may not be the one, it might be the Wembley job, but I think it's the case of Stanley Seti that involved a body being dropped into a body of water. And I think it's probably the English Channel, but I'm not sure. Um, that was interesting from the perspective of the crazy stories that the guy came up with to avoid the worst case scenario in his prosecution, which he initially kind of got away with in a way, I guess. I might not be saying this right. Some of these stories are starting to bleed together in my head. That was still less fictionalized, it seemed. And then as we got down farther, I got kind of irritated a little bit with there's a spy case in here. With the last four stories in the book, the Portland spy case, they all have a one-page preface. And it basically says because it's all top secret that they don't really know what happened, but here's the story. And it's like, how can you give me a story if you don't know what happened? So that was troubling. Then I got to Dr. Crippen's diary. And of course, the keynote piece of the story, the diary, is fictionalized. So I don't quite understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to take real cases, flesh them out with stuff that was fictionalized, I guess to make it read too far, because it's a really big book. And the ending of it, the stories were less interesting than the beginning ones, but they still went on with the long, verbiage. Okay, yeah. Case of Stanley Seti was the one dumped in the body of water. The Wembley job was a bunch of bank robberies, and they were kind of, I don't know. You've seen bank robbery capers on the movies, and frankly, they're better because back then they really didn't have any high-tech way of catching these guys. It was basically just mass surveillance. And it was kind of troubling because it basically gave you the original probable justification for mass surveillance that we have nowadays. Basically just watch everybody all the time and then they can't do anything. So what started out originally as organized crime, stealing from banks and using henchmen to do their dirty work to get a bunch of millions of dollars, has now changed in our society to white collar crime that no one can trace through whatever means, crypto or hacking or some kind of a governmental fraud or something like that. So it's now there's things that they can get away with, and there's no one that can be caught seemingly, right? Unless they blame it on some poor dummy that's the hacker or whatever. The Portland spy case, that was the espionage one, and since it was not verifiable, I wasn't going to read it. Dr. Crippen's diary, let's see. His wife was running around on him or something. One of the most fiendish crimes of the century, but again, it's a lot of it's fictionalized. Shepherd's Bush case, unprecedented. I started skimming it at the end, so I got through the first half of the book reading it entirely, and then I skipped that spy case, and I was kind of uninspired, and I started skipping again. And yeah, I mean, like I say, it was written in the 70s, kind of a different time. I think people's expectations and what's this here? Ads will run shortly for some viewers. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up. It was about a 3 out of a 5 scale. I enjoyed the very first part of it, especially the first story, but the rest of them, maybe not so much.